All right. Well, welcome everyone to a conversation that I am excited to have. I want to introduce to you my friend Andrew Osano. How are you, Andrew?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. As you can see by Andrew's background, he is an actual legit musician, right? Some of the very cool things that Andrew does is he gets to live many musicians' dreams of actually scoring movies and video games and being involved in fascinating creative processes. So I don't know if I ever told you this, but every time that I have a conversation with Andrew about what he does, I just want to hear more of it. So I'm really excited to be able to connect with you. You are back in Michigan, right?
Yes, yes.
But this is a across the country connection. So God bless Zoom.
Yeah. I can imagine going through this in before the modern age. It's pretty incredible what we have.
Yes. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So the conversation that I wanted us to have today, you being a musician and a Christian, is simply revolving a little bit about how do you think that music can help us navigate time like the one we're navigating right now, and also how does that play, as we navigate this with music, how does it play in the way that we relate to God as well? So just to kind of maybe get us started, and I know that as we were preparing for this, this is such a big question and subjective question, but for those of us who are a little bit musically illiterate, what is music? What are we listening to when we hear music?
Well, music can be defined several different ways. There are some things that I may define as music as another person may not. We have this idea that music is universal when it actually isn't. It's very informed by our culture, our upbringing, and so I was doing some research beforehand and looking into some musical traditions, well, traditions that I would consider musical just because of where I'm coming from, that aren't considered musical in that culture. Specifically, the Muslim Azan is what I would consider singing, but because singing is forbidden in mosques, it's not actually considered music. And it doesn't even follow the traditional Muslim style of music, so it's not something that they consider as music themselves. So this idea that music is universal may not be completely accurate. There are some commonalities, obviously, between what's musical, and there are some through lines, but exactly. So how you define music is very much informed from where you're coming from. I come from the Western musical tradition, so it's intervals and rhythm, and it's very structured. And whereas some other things are very more plain chant, for example, is very loose. Doesn't really have as much of a rhythmical structure.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and I know I took some years of music theory, and the word structure brings back a lot of memories. Not always the most fun ones, but yeah, it really is interesting to something that most of us do as easily as turning on the radio or whatever it is that we listen music with. It's interesting how quickly we have these airwaves coming to us, but how much work and structure and organizing and beauty there is, and
Mhm.
as you talked about, the rhythms and all of that. So how do you think, or how do you experience, obviously from your point of view, music to be helpful when we're facing times like the one right now, but not limited to? I know that most of us are not going to face more than one pandemic in our lifetime, but we do face
Ideally.
grief or fear or
Mhm.
certainty. So how do you, as a human being and a musician, find that music can help us when mental struggles come our way because of what we're facing in life?
Well, is particularly special because it's both very personal and also communal. Like it can be very communal, and how we experience those two are a lot of times very different. So you may experience a song one way on your own versus having it in a large group in a larger setting. So it's very setting dependent, and I think that's what's really special about it. So you can take it as something to help yourself through a crisis,
Mm-hmm.
or something as a group to help through a crisis.
Hmm. How do you have any suggestions or any ideas as to what kind of music could we use, or what kind of music do you use, for example, to help you face difficult days?
Uh, um, there is so much beauty in so many different types of music.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much a broad, kind of a broad spectrum music lover.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that we share all kinds of like just running the gamut of musical styles and just culturally different styles of music. So for me, it's very different. It's a very different picture for a lot of people because
Mm-hmm.
I have both the music that I grew up with that is very special to me, and
Mm-hmm.
I just the and then there's also the music that I've discovered along the way.
Hmm.
I'll discover new music and just be captivated by it, and I'll just listen to it on repeat. So there is something to be said about how we have these attachments to music from childhood, but also the discovery we find when we learn something new about it.
Mm-hmm. So, so yeah, and I like the fact that you mentioned, the music from our childhood. So music almost has this power to transport us to a different time, right?
Exactly.
To a different place. How interesting is that? Yeah. So yeah, well, when we listen to music, for example, putting in my case, I know that my dad, um, when I was very little, he owned this cassettes of Nat King Cole, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then who he would play them. And now as an adult, now that my dad is also passed recently, um, I listen to them, and especially I listen to it when I'm a little bit stressed, right? We'll have Alexa or whatever play Nat King Cole, and it would literally take me back to my childhood living room.
Yeah, that phrase in particular, like you hear a piece of music and that you automatically say the phrase that takes me back.
Yeah.
And so there's this, um, it takes you back to not only the time but the emotions you felt at the time.
Hmm.
I had just a couple of examples. Like since I do um, film music has played a very large role in my life. And so I was recently rewatching Bambi, and the music in that, as soon as I heard it, I didn't realize how much of it I remembered. And when I did hear it, it took me back to like the first times that I watched the movie with my family.
Hmm.
Or I remember watching Land Before Time and hearing the score to that. And it's like that also took me back to that's probably one of the first movies I saw. And so it's just like
Yeah.
it takes you back and it puts you in this mindset that you were in at the time, the very first time you saw it.
Yeah. That's interesting. So we could almost say that in a way, um, now that the current crisis that we're living right now with COVID-19, that it would be definitely helpful to try to seek for that music which is able not necessarily to help us escape reality, but to fill us with feelings of peace or comfort, or the family times that we long for or miss, or the sense of safety, right? That you're a little kid, you're with your parents.
Exactly.
It really is fascinating how music is able to do that. So let me ask you then, do you think that music can do this? And you talked before about congregational singing or music experience, right?
Mhm.
Which can be concerts of any kind, but also church, right? The church experience, worship experience. So can music also take us back somewhere as we relate to God?
Yeah, I think that's very much the case. You'll find that people that may have fallen away from the church or like have kind of lost their beliefs will still remember the songs that they sang and still have positive feelings toward them, just because it took them back to a time where they were happy, or just a different time in their life that they still cherish, even though they may have negative feelings toward religion as a whole. And so there's something very powerful about that
Hmm.
aspect of the worship service.
Hmm. What kind of hymns or music? They don't have to be hymns, but in the most traditional like hymnal book. But what religious music would you recommend to listen to in moments like the ones we're living now?
Uh, something that you have a deep attachment to. Like I'm all about musical discovery, and that can be a very powerful thing. But I think in times like these, going back to something that grounds you and roots you, is very important at this kind of time. Because like I said, it takes you back. And in these times where where everyone is away from each other, and you want to be taken back to a time where you're together with people and just have these positive memories, I think it's a good idea to just listen to music that you grew up with, or that you sang with your family, or in your home church or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is interesting that I learned that I hadn't really realized this recently, you know, but when Jesus is at the cross and about to die, you know, he says, Father, Father, why have you forsaken me, right? That this is actually quoting a psalm. And psalms are songs.
Yeah.
So here you have Jesus hanging from the cross, close to his death, probably singing.
Exactly.
And I love that, you know, and when you think about it, you know, a lot of us as Christians, we use music as a channel for positivity, right? Like, but in a way, Jesus is not here saying, you know, I know I'm close to you even in times like this or whatever it is. This is a song expressing, why have you abandoned me?
Yes.
Right.
And I think there's a misconception in a lot of Christian traditions where you're supposed to be happy all the time. And if you go through the Psalms, David was not happy all the time, or the psalmist, I should say, was not happy all the time. And it's very important to express these things. It's like to pretend like we're not going through something is very damaging. Like to pretend like this isn't happening around us just exacerbates the situation. I think it's important to express, because music is a very strong form of expression. There's a saying in musical theater, I'm going to misquote it probably, but when a character is experiencing too much emotion to continue speaking, they break out into song. And that's kind of what you'll see happening in the Bible as well. Like with Mary and Elizabeth, when they're overcome with emotion, they break out into song and dance. And I think that's our expression is very much tied to music and the physical aspect, especially singing. Like there's with singing and to a slightly lesser extent playing an instrument, there's a physical, because you carry your voice with you all the time. And you're creating something with your body that is beyond yourself.
Wow. So we could almost say, you know, as we're talking about music and music lifting our hearts and minds up in moments of mental struggles, and also relating us to God, that what music can do for us is not limited to simply lifting our spirits up, which is a really good thing. It can also be used as a channel to express our feelings and our emotions, even toward God.
Yes.
In ways that we're not able to verbalize, maybe.
Yeah, there's a certain level of catharsis.
Yeah.
To just expressing pain through music.
Yeah.
There's something interesting about that as well, where sometimes music will override the lyric. Like so, there's an example that I constantly think of, the song "His Eyes on the Sparrow." If you read the lyrics, they're very, I sing because I'm happy, but you so often hear that song in a very mournful way. Like you'll hear the song at funerals and it's sung very mournfully. And if you actually pay attention to the lyric, it's I sing because I'm happy. So there's this disconnect between the music and the lyric, and the music takes precedent.
Wow. So, wow, there's so much here. I'm trying to, absolutely. Wow, yeah. So I think that what I'm getting at, I think what I'm concluding is that we need to remember, as human beings and as Christians and as, you know, people that love music, very different music maybe, but music is such an appealing theme from the very beginning that we that music is there to speak to our souls and for us to speak back to God or back to each other.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always have to be, how would I say this? Yeah, I think you use the word catharsis, right? It doesn't necessarily always have to be upbeat and happy and whatever it is. That it is okay to express ourselves and our mourns and our fears and our grievings toward God in this case through music, and it is going to bring healing. It is going to be uplifting.
Yes, because especially when you say healing, because it's it's very hard to heal a wound that you hide. Like if you don't expose it to air and let it breathe, it won't heal as well. And so if you pretend like everything's okay, that wound's going to fester, and it's going to eventually come to a head. So getting that out and really expressing it honestly will help bring you closer to God in a way that you won't have experienced it if you had sheltered that and pretended like this isn't there.
Yeah, I think that a lot of us shy away from that because this requires a level of intimacy through music to God or with each other that we're not necessarily always comfortable with, right? But I think that again, Jesus on the cross singing a song of despair and rejection, it is an invitation to be vulnerable, right?
And it's also a way, it gives you permission to have these feelings. Because a lot of people feel like they don't have the permission to have these feelings toward God. Like, why have you forsaken me in this time? They feel like if they express that, they are afraid of having someone say that, oh, you've lost your faith. There's something wrong with you. When God has made us very emotional creatures, and to express these things is very important to him. So if you're having these frustrations, he wants to hear it. And that's the whole point of this communal relationship. If you have a relationship with anybody and you don't express these feelings, that relationship's not going to last. So if you have your best friend, your wife, your husband, and you have these frustrations and you don't express them, number one, unlike with God, he will know the frustration. But with in other relationships, they won't know that you're feeling this way. They won't know that maybe a change needs to be made. And for you, you're gonna keep this in you, and you're gonna dwell on these things. We have a tendency to dwell on, especially if we don't get them out. And so it's important to air them, get them out into the open, so we can address them. I think it's very important to address all emotions, not just happiness.
Amen. Amen. I like that. So I know that you are obviously involved as a musician in the church experiences and in leading people into musical worship. And a lot of us right now in the news and churches and families and conversations really are asking right now, the big question, one of the big questions is, what are we going to go back to, right? What is going to be normal? When is going to be the new normal? And what are the scars of COVID-19 going to look like? And so what I wanted to ask you, as our last question, is you as a musician, if you could have your way, how would you like music to be used in congregational worship as we return to the new normal, whatever that looks like? What would you think would be a way that music should be used in church for it to be the best that it can be, being aware of the reality that the people walking into our doors are experiencing?
Well, one experience that I had specifically yesterday, because I was asked to play for Andrews University Vespers, and they recorded it yesterday, and I'm going to air it on Friday evening. But one of the people that was running just running the whole process expressed that he missed this communal singing, this coming together and having a chance to worship together as a group. So that's something that it's hard to experience now. Like, I find even when I'm watching a service, it's hard for me. It's like this awkward to sing along with the screen. So I find myself just kind of having it being one way. And I think when we get back and we get beyond this, I think it'll be very exciting to see the involvement, because people won't realize how much they've missed it. And I think that will make the experience much stronger. And I think it's important for us who lead to make sure we're doing all we can to invite the congregation to be involved with the worship service. Because it's very easy for a group of people to just sit back and let the people up front do the music, but worship is very communal. And it doesn't matter if you necessarily have, quote, talent. God wants to hear our voices. He wants to hear our expression.
So you talked about involvement, and this definitely matters to me, especially as a pastor, right? So do you have maybe one or two recommendations as to how, because obviously the normal involvement is you get people to sing, right? But what ways in which we can be more intentional about involving the congregation into singing together?
I think it's important to balance the familiar with the new.
Okay.
So there have been times where I'll go to a church service or any worship service where I will have never heard any of the songs, and so it's hard for me to engage with that. And so I'm pretty good at picking up melodies, or so I can sing along maybe, but I won't be able to sing the lyrics obviously because I won't know them. And so I think it's important to have a grounding in something familiar, because as a church we have literally 1,000 or more years of musical tradition to draw from. So I think it's important to blend those and but also not to stagnate, to express the things that we're going through today, because we're going through a lot right now, and we can draw from the ancient songs and to that we can relate to, but we should also be creating something new and to bring to the table.
Wow, I love that. I love that. Well, one thing, that also, I think it's important. This has to do more with the wording, right? I remember listening to a sermon where the pastor was making the point that a lot of more contemporary musical worships are focused on right? The individual experiences, my God, my salvation, what I want, what I need. But that when you look at the Psalms, there is room for I. There is also a lot of room for we. Right? Just the Psalms, if you have different prayers throughout the Old Testament where, for example, the prayer of Daniel, right, where he says, we have sinned. So I think that it definitely is going to be important to have to emphasize as we worship and as we borrow from the old and produce new, and to underline the sense of community, that we're in this together, that we, right now we're so desperate for that community, right? So when we go back to it, that we don't lose it, that the desire to face God together and journey through the ups and downs of life and the world's history together.
Exactly. I think it's important not to forget this time. Not to forget this time that we've had apart, so that when we come back together, we appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, friend, it's been a pleasure.
Yes, indeed.
Have this conversation with you. I hope that people that have been listening are blessed. I hope that people do whatever they can, as I am trying to do, and I'm sure you are, to listen to good music that is uplifting, right? And it's you don't have to be alone to do that. I have so much fun as I journey through my days with my 2-year-old, listening to music, and it's just so rewarding to see how it impacts her and how it helps her to deal with her understanding of what's going on. Just as a silly example, I was listening, my wife was listening to the baby, the baby video camera that we have in her room, and my daughter was struggling to fall asleep, so she was singing to herself Radio from Kermit, and it's just so cool. I think that to see that in a 2-year-old reminds me that I also can use music to journey through life, and especially through the lows of life.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You healthy and safe, and I hope that you stay that way. That we're able to connect soon again. All right. Blessings to everyone.
Blessings.